Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announcing a 25% tariff on Iran's trading partners. The president is now reportedly leaning toward Iran strikes as the death toll from anti-regime protests continues to climb. Mario Tzu at the White House. A human rights group says the number of people killed in Iran's protests has exceeded 500. This comes as Iran's chief of police tells officers to respond forcefully to what he calls violent rioters. Jason Perry with the update. President Trump is set to meet with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado later this week. Meanwhile, the State Department is urging Americans to leave Venezuela. Luis Martinez brings us the latest. ICE operations are still surging in Minnesota, and a driver drives a truck through a crowd showing solidarity with anti-government protesters in Iran. Jason Blair has more.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump vowing that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% U.S. tariff. This coming as the president warns he may carry out strikes against Iran over its violent repression of anti-regime protests. NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tzu has more from the White House.
I mean, there's so many of them, and some were shot. Are we getting a full report? I'm getting an hourly report, and we're going to make a determination.
President Trump saying that the U.S. military is weighing some very strong options for intervention in Iran, as reports claim that now over 500 people have been killed in anti-Iranian regime protests.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president.
This comes as the White House confirms President Trump spoke to Elon Musk about restoring the internet in Iran, where authorities have blacked out services since Thursday. President Trump's also threatening Cuba, urging them to make a deal and proclaiming no more oil or money will be sent there post-Maduro's capture.
The president's made it very clear that we don't want to see any more jug boats sailing from Venezuela towards the United States of America, which we have not, frankly, in the last week. President's also made it very clear that only oil tankers that are approved by the United States of America will be flowing from Venezuela, and we will continue to seize ships that are stateless or that are not approved for commerce.
The Venezuelan regime was long propped up by Cuba's armed forces and counterintelligence agencies. And in the 9 days since Maduro's capture, Venezuelans worldwide have been celebrating, with a group outside the White House today singing the Venezuelan national anthem.
We are appreciating the Donald Trump decision to take the control of Nicolas Maduro. We want to express he's doing the right thing, and as a Venezuelan, I appreciate what he's doing.
We have a president now that's willing to back you guys up. That goes with the Iranian people. We're with the Iranian people. We're with the Cubans. We're with people from all these countries where they have these dictators and communist movement.
Socialism is a destruction, and we see the same results in different countries as well. So if you apply socialism in the United States, I'm pretty sure you're going to have the same results as Venezuela, as Cuba. We were giving oil to Cuba for free. We were giving oil to China for free. We were giving oil to Russia for free.
Socialism, communism, the same thing. This just brings chaos to life. This country is not for communism. It's not what we stand for. We're here for freedom. We believe in freedom in every sense of the word.
And looking ahead at the president's schedule, tomorrow President Trump is expected to head to Michigan, where he'll deliver remarks at the Detroit Economic Club and tour a factory in Dearborn that produces F-150s. Reporting from the White House, Mario Tzu, NTD News.
A human rights group says the death toll in Iran's protests has now risen to 572. This comes as Iran's chief of police tells officers to respond forcefully to what he calls violent rioters. NTD's Jason Perry has the update and a warning. This report contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
In a tragic video released over the weekend, a woman could be heard crying as people walked between body bags at a morgue in Tehran. And more body bags were seen outside the morgue as loved ones attempted to identify the bodies. This comes amid a wave of protests that began over Iran's failing economy, but later shifted to oppose the Iranian regime. According to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, at least 572 people have died since the protests began, including over 500 protesters and 69 security personnel. That's over 500 more deaths than the human rights group reported just a few days ago. Iran's police chief explained how they're dealing with the protests.
From now on, the police consider the situation to be one of violent unrest only, and will deal with violent rioters decisively, swiftly, and forcefully. Protesters should also be aware that by standing alongside violent agitators, they themselves become victims of the violence caused by these agitators.
According to the U.S. State Department, Chinese companies have assisted Iran in tracking protesters by providing surveillance technologies used for the repression of human rights. And the Iranian regime cut off internet and phone lines in the country last week. Some see the move as a way to help the regime stay in power, making it difficult for outsiders to know the actual situation on the ground. However, a cyber espionage investigator said things could change if President Trump helps put a satellite over Iran to enable cell phone use.
And if President Trump declares an emergency regarding Iran, and he talks to the FCC and Elon Musk, who was also stood with the Iranian people in the past and also now, can activate this service for Iran, I think this solution will turn around everything. And the people will overthrow the regime much sooner than anyone expects.
And on Monday, Iran's president was seen walking through a crowd of pro-government demonstrators in Tehran. Iran's state-run media said that pro-government rallies were held throughout the country. A speaker at one of the rallies compared the United States and Israel to ISIS, blaming both countries for the current situation in Iran. Jason Perry, NTD News.
International leaders are voicing support for the protesters in Iran. Pressure on the Islamic regime is increasing as protesters in Iran keep fighting for freedom. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has more reactions from around the globe.
I think we can all agree that the world would be better, safer, and more just if you could break that regime.
Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman saying he would support military action against the Iranian regime. President Trump on Sunday said he's not ruling out a possible attack.
We're looking at some very strong options.
But still, the White House makes clear Trump's preferred option remains diplomacy. And even if diplomacy fails, Trump recently said a military option wouldn't necessarily mean American boots on the ground. He suggested it might be similar to the operation in June when the U.S. hit Iranian nuclear sites.
I think I was the only Democrat that fully supported our strike of their Iranian nuclear facilities last year. And now, by then, without those kinds of strikes, Iran could have acquired a nuclear bomb.
International leaders are increasing calls on the Iranian regime to stop killing protesters. A spokesperson for the European Union weighed in on Monday.
We do stand in full solidarity with the Iranian people, and we condemn the use of force against demonstrators. We stand ready to propose new, more severe sanctions.
The president of Israel says he also stands with the protesters in Iran, adding that the demonstrators are marching for their freedom.
And being ruthlessly repressed by a regime that is the root of so much evil in the world.
The Israeli president added that he hopes the Iranian people can soon be free. The Chancellor of Germany says protesters deserve respect for resisting oppression by the Iranian regime.
I call on the Iranian leadership to protect its population rather than threatening it. We condemn in the strongest terms the violence.
Demonstrations in support of Iranian protesters continue spreading across the globe. Leader of the British Reform Party, Nigel Farage, joined demonstrators in the UK on Monday.
This is the moment. If ever there was a moment in the last 40 plus years to get freedom back for the lovely Persian people, it's now. Man up.
Over the weekend, people gathered to demonstrate in Washington, Paris, London and other cities, supporting the anti-regime protesters in Iran. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
And joining us now to unpack everything happening in Iran is Andrew Harding. He's a senior associate for national security coalitions at the Heritage Foundation. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here. Diving right in, President Trump just announced on Truth Social that the U.S. will be imposing a 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran. What message does this send, especially to Russia and China's shadow fleets?
Well, I think what this message signals is that the president is very serious about seeing a peaceful resolution with the Iranian people and the protesters as they push back against the Iranian regime that has caused significant economic devastation for the Iranian people, that is politically isolated and is militarily unable to protect itself, and has only caused more regional instability, not only for the United States, but for countries throughout the Middle East. So the president, of course, we know that he's very willing to use tariffs when it comes to strategic decisions on keeping Americans safe. But in this case, he's also demonstrated that while the Iranian people are advocating and fighting for their own futures, he's not just going to stand by. The president is willing to take action. We also saw that with Operation Midnight Hammer months ago, that he's willing to take this action on the Iranian regime and ensure that they understand that taking any negative actions to the Iranian people is going to be met with significant action. This also therefore signals to Russia and China that the president and the United States will not allow an Iranian regime to cause more regional instability. They want to see change. The president wants to see change. And Russia and China need to accept the United States will stand up for its people and for freedoms and democracies around the world.
And to your point, as protests enter the third week, Tehran says it is open to negotiations, but is, quote, prepared for war. That is after the White House confirmed U.S. airstrikes against Iran are on the table. Talk to us about President Trump's calculus here. For example, how will the U.S. ensure our troops in the region won't be harmed? Could we see them evacuate, or, could we see that negotiated end?
I think the president's been very clear that the United States is not going to directly put its military in harm's way when it comes to what options are available for the president to, yes, keep Americans safe, but also to ensure that the regime knows that it should not take any type of action that is going to seriously undermine regional peace and seriously hurt the Iranian people. It's important to note that the Iranian regime does not reflect what the Iranian people are about. The people of Iran love America. They want to see a better, more free future, a more economically prosperous future, and a stronger Iran that the Iranian regime is making difficult to achieve. So when the president thinks about the types of actions that can be taken, he's going to do everything he can to ensure that U.S. troops and personnel are not put in harm's way, hence why strikes could be an option, not putting boots on the ground, for example. But we also saw just a couple of weeks ago, what happened in Venezuela, which shows how strong and how many options the U.S. military has when it comes to securing its interests. The ability to go into Venezuela and capture the illegitimate president, Nicolas Maduro, demonstrates that the United States takes its personnel protection extremely seriously, is going to mitigate the risk to U.S. troops, but it's also not afraid under President Trump's leadership to take decisive action.
And there is also an information blackout in Iran right now, with reports saying that even Starlink signals are disrupted by military-grade jamming devices likely from Russia or China. Starlink has been critical to Ukraine, for example, in the war there. So what is the role of Starlink in Iran? How transformative is this type of technology during unrest?
Well, Starlink is extremely important, especially as the Iranian regime is cutting off internet access. It shows that the Iranian regime is scared. It shows that they are scared to see how the international, different countries around the world, but also international sentiment can resonate with the Iranian people. It puts a spotlight on the Iranian regime and the atrocities that they're willing to commit against their own people. So by having Starlink, it allows the Iranian people to share their stories, to share what they're seeing on the ground, to coordinate with their partners and friends across the world, and to, as a result, give the necessary information to, say, President Trump, the United States, the European Union, other partners, both at the state level and international level, to coordinate together on pressure against the regime to not take actions that further hurt the Iranian people. So by having this information, ensures that people are safer, ensures that they're able to contact their loved ones across the world. But politically, it forces that regime to know that they're being watched, that they can try to curtail information. They can try to prevent people around the world from looking at what's happening in Iran and holding the regime accountable. With Starlink, that accountability can be provided and ensure that the Iranian people are able to protect themselves and fight for a freer Iran.
And there's a lot of support from President Trump and his administration for the people of Iran. What would the fall of the Iranian regime mean for U.S. interests?
Well, the fall of the Iranian regime would mean a stronger United States, a weaker China, and a safer Middle East. We know that the Iranian regime has been very willing to threaten military action against the United States. They've been willing, and not only willing to do that from Iran, but we know that they support terrorist cells across the Middle East, whether it's Hamas, whether that's Hezbollah, whether it's the Houthis in Yemen. We know that Iran has its tentacles all across the region. And they're very willing to put U.S. personnel at risk and put U.S. citizens in harm's way. So the fall of the regime would, while we can't guarantee what the outcome does look like, we do think it's more likely to see a more potentially more friendly regime that's more willing, more pragmatic, and willing to work with the United States. It means there's a weaker China because it means that China is not going to have as strong of a relationship with Iran's oil sector. We know that the Chinese Communist Party is happy to prop up the Iranian regime and bypass different sanctions to keep that regime afloat. So by removing the regime, it allows a better opportunity to weaken China, to ensure that they're not willing to take any miscalculated risks against the United States. And finally, it means that there's a safer Middle East. It means that there's an opportunity to have a freer Middle East that has reduced terrorist activity. We know that our great partner in Israel is able to have a more peaceful and safer future and be able to see some real progress when it comes to a stable, peaceful Middle East that reduces threats to U.S. troops and ensures that we see, finally, peace in the Middle East.
Andrew Harding, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Should the U.S. take action in Iran, will the regime's three-day communications blackout be enough to stop the protests? And what's really at stake on a global scale? Hear from foreign policy expert Walid Faris tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern. President Trump is set to meet with the Venezuelan opposition leader later this week as the administration warns Americans in Venezuela to, quote, leave the country immediately. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details.
Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado met with Pope Leo at the Vatican during an audience that was not previously listed on the Pope's calendar. Machado asked the Pope to press the Venezuelan regime for the liberation of all political prisoners in Venezuela. Since the removal of Nicolás Maduro, only a handful of the nearly 1,000 political prisoners in Venezuela have been released.
We feel worried as family members. In what sense? We need a proof of life to be issued so we can verify that our relatives are truly still alive. We need the government to issue that proof of life so we can be certain they are alive. What's happening? If this proof of life cannot be issued, which is the only thing we are asking for, then give us the opportunity to access the facilities and see our relatives.
President Trump is set to meet with Maria Corina Machado this Thursday, and President Trump has also left the door open to the possibility of meeting with the Venezuelan regime's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez.
Venezuela is really working out well. We're working along really well with their leadership, and we'll see how it all works out. At some point I'll meet. Yeah, she's been very good. Look, she asked us, can we take 50 million barrels of oil, and I said, yes, we can. It's $4.2 billion. And it's on its way right now to the United States.
The Venezuelan regime is in negotiations with the Trump administration to reestablish diplomatic ties, and they're doing so through the government of Qatar.
I want to thank the Emir of Qatar, who during the hardest hours when Venezuelan was being attacked, he, his government and his prime minister helped us to obtain the proof of life of the president, Nicolás Maduro, and the first combatant, Celia Flores. I want to thank them in the name of the president and the people of Venezuela for facilitating the creation of a channel between the US and Venezuelan governments. I know you are helping in a work agenda for it to be useful for both parties involved.
Despite attempts to normalize diplomatic relations, the United States government has warned its citizens to leave Venezuela immediately amid reports of paramilitary forces known as colectivos in Venezuela that are setting up roadblocks in search of American citizens. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
As Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado prepares to meet with President Trump this week, NTD's Arlene Richards explores what's behind the U.S. operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado is scheduled to meet with President Trump on Thursday, according to a senior White House official. Trump has not endorsed Machado to lead Venezuela after the U.S. military operation to remove former dictator Nicolas Maduro.
I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country.
Trump has said that the U.S. will run Venezuela for now with heavy involvement in its oil market. But what's his long game? Senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times and host of Crossroads, Joshua Phillip, said the strike on Venezuela is only the beginning.
There's a lot more to it. What we're watching take place on the surface in Venezuela is just the tip of the iceberg.
Phillips said there are past events that are tied to the recent strike in Venezuela. For example, a war that almost took place recently between Venezuela and Guyana over oil. And the Venezuela election of 2018, in which the first Trump administration and the Biden administration refused to recognize Maduro as a legitimate leader of the country. They said Maduro stole the election. And there's a territorial battle involving China, Russia, and Iran, who've built networks designed to keep the United States out of the entire region. Phillip explains how the U.S. was pushed out of Venezuela.
The country was the channel to break regional ties with the United States all throughout Latin America and to import influence from the alternative world order through Russia, Iran, and the Chinese Communist Party.
Phillips said Cuba had initially been the stronghold of communism, but it was limited in what it could do because of Venezuela's poor economy. Then,
Venezuela brought the money. They were able to expand a communist-aligned order funded by drugs and oil that would push the United States out of the entire region.
Phillips said that order is now collapsing and that it appears the U.S. operation, which is partly about sanctioning oil and destroying drug networks, is also about rebuilding U.S. influence and presence in Latin America. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Immigration operations are not slowing down in Minnesota. 2,000 federal agents were sent to the state last week, with more expected this week. The Department of Homeland Security says last week agents faced 10 car ramming attacks. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
ICE immigration operations in Minnesota are still surging. Reportedly, 1,000 additional agents will be heading to the state this week. That is following 2,000 agents that were sent to the area just last week. Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security Tricia McLaughlin says more than 2,000 arrests have been made since the Minnesota operation called Operation Metro Surge began. The DHS is calling it the largest immigration operation in history. The DHS says that 2025 saw a 3,200% increase in vehicular attacks against ICE agents.
Just last week alone, we saw 10 vehicle rammings. That's the weaponization of a vehicle, a deadly weapon against our law enforcement. We're seeing that's becoming a more and more common tactic.
Vehicle attacks have been in the spotlight since the January 7th incident involving an ICE-related shooting resulting in the death of a protester who was driving a car. The DHS says the agent fired in self-defense due to the woman disobeying instructions from law enforcement and then driving toward the officer. Others say the woman wasn't aiming for the ICE agent.
I think it is really important for Americans to record, to create the level of accountability and transparency that we need.
Including that officer in Minneapolis who was absolutely justified in using self-defense against a lunatic who was part of a group, an organized group, to interject and to impede on law enforcement operations.
On Sunday, a man drove a U-Haul truck through a crowd of protesters who were showing solidarity with the large ongoing protests against the Islamic revolutionary regime in Iran. Luckily, there were no fatalities. 2 people suffered minor injuries. After the driver stopped, a group of protesters surrounded the U-Haul truck in anger before the police took the driver away. On the side of the truck, a sign read, "No Shah, no regime. USA don't repeat 1953, no mullah." It referenced a 1953 coup in Iran backed by the U.S. government and Iran's Shah, who was ousted by the Islamic revolutionary regime. The sign suggests that the driver opposes reinstalling a monarchy in Iran. After the driver stopped, the signage was taken down by protesters. At this time, it's still unclear what the driver's motive was for the incident. According to LA police, the driver could face a charge of assault with a deadly weapon. Jason Blair, NTD News.
At the Golden Globes on Sunday, several celebrities wore pins to protest the death of Renee Good, a woman who was shot and killed in Minneapolis after allegedly trying to ram a car into an ICE officer. Has anti-ICE narrative played a role in fueling the violence against immigration officials? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the streets of D.C. to hear from the people.
At the Golden Globe, some celebrities are wearing pins that carry anti-ICE messages on them. What are your thoughts on that?
It's America. You can do what you want as far as that goes. I didn't watch the Golden Globes. I was watching NFL football. You know, you can wear a pin that says whatever you want. You know, I don't have a problem with it at all.
I mean, I would say it's a way of propaganda just to get more people riled up over this ICE situation. But I would say the media coverage is they're not precise, and the way they're presenting it is just false.
ICE is doing, I'm going to say, God's work. Why is it God's work? Don't make me cry. You know how many people have lost their life because of these illegal immigrants and everything? I mean, it's like a fantasy world they live in, you know, like a fantasy utopia or whatever.
They're using immigration as a weapon to the United States. So because they pay people to protest against ICE, and they want to create violence.
Do you think the narratives out there have been contributing to the rising violence against ICE agencies?
That's what they want. It was the same in the 2019 in Miami. They pay people, and actually a lot of people from Venezuela, they used to pay people to go there and do all the mess.
It's a little bit of chaos on both sides, and people tend to get the emotions rolling, and they take things to the extreme. There's a lot of narratives from all over the place, so people need to choose, and some people go too far.
Most definitely. Okay, we're going to talk about the media. Let's say the media and everything that's going on right now is just to antagonize people and making things worse than what it is, okay? Because people are easy to be deceived.
They're definitely getting other people riled up. I actually believe that people are getting paid to go out and protest, and they're kind of creating a snowball effect where they're riling people up and then trying to make it seem bigger than it actually is.
The state of Minnesota and the Twin Cities are suing the Trump administration. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison today calling the recent immigration enforcement operations, quote, a federal invasion. Here's what he said.
And we're here to announce a lawsuit we're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota. Because this has to stop. It just has to stop. We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. We allege that the surge, reckless impact on our schools, on our local law enforcement is a violation of the 10th Amendment and the sovereign laws and powers of the Constitution grants to states.
Minnesota alleged that federal agents used excessive and lethal force and carried out, quote, warrantless racist arrests. The Trump administration's immigration enforcement operations in the Twin Cities began in December and involved thousands of federal officers. The Minnesota Attorney General accused the Trump administration of targeting the state over political differences. The lawsuit came after Illinois and Chicago also sued the Trump administration over federal operations. The DHS responded to the Minnesota lawsuit today, saying, quote, Keith Ellison made it abundantly clear today he is prioritizing politics over public safety. President Trump's job is to protect the American people and enforce the law, no matter who your mayor, governor, or state attorney general is. Meanwhile, the Justice Department today charged a man shot by a Border Patrol agent in Portland, Oregon during a confrontation last week. The illegal immigrant faces one charge of aggravated assault of a federal officer and one charge of depredation of federal property. Coming up, the future of women's sports is on the line. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will take up the case of transgender athletes and whether men can compete in women's sports. Jack Bradley brings us a preview. Lawmakers are trying to work out a deal to lower health care costs. President Trump justifying an end to the enhanced tax subsidies that help pay for Obamacare. Melina Weiskup with the latest. And nurses in New York City went on their largest strike in the city's history. Nearly 16,000 hospital workers walk off the job as the union says talks have stalled. Sean Marshall has what they're demanding after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Supreme Court will hear arguments tomorrow on whether male athletes can compete in female sports if they claim they're transgender. Many female athletes at a press conference today say allowing males into their sports is unfair and unsafe. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the Supreme Court.
The fate of girls and women's sports may ultimately rest in a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court on Tuesday for the first time is weighing in on whether boys and men who say that they're transgender can compete in female sports. 29 states, the NCAA, and the U.S. Olympic Committee all have bans on transgender athletes competing. As far as the Republicans Attorneys General Association goes, they're urging the High Court to uphold the state bans, saying it's a matter of fairness.
Women and girls should feel safe in the locker rooms and have the opportunity to participate in fair competitions.
Federal judges in West Virginia and Idaho have ruled that banning boys from girls' sports is a civil rights violation that discriminates based on sex. Officials in those states and beyond are calling on the justices to reverse those decisions.
I've spoken with parents all across my state, thousands of parents, and these are parents from both political parties. I found that this is one issue on which they agree, the issue of ensuring fairness and a level playing field for our girls when it comes to sports.
Many female athletes who had to compete against or alongside boys and men say that this is a matter of protecting women.
5 times I lost to a male athlete who identifies as a female.
I know they run faster, kick the ball harder, and foul with much more force. They watched a boy slam the ball in our faces. There were plenty of opportunities for this boy to play at the boys' courts on the other side of the convention center, where, mind you, the nets are over 7 inches higher than our nets.
Women's sports exist because men and women are biologically different. At the Paris Olympics, male athletes won gold medals in women's boxing, and the women who objected were shamed.
Can we as women call ourselves champions? Can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in an intimate area of undressing, such as a locker room, without having to fear a man walking into that space?
Why will little girls even bother to compete at a certain point when they know that it doesn't matter to our institutions, that it isn't fair for them?
President Trump signed an executive order last February that pulls federal funds from any institution that allows males to compete in female sports. Several schools across the country subsequently reversed their rules, banning transgender athletes from competing. The arguments in Tuesday's hearing and the judge's comments on which way they're leaning may just give us a sense of where girls and women's sports lie ahead for the future here in the U.S. Reporting from the Supreme Court, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
As lawmakers are working to find a deal on lowering healthcare costs, President Trump justifies ending COVID-era tax credits to support Obamacare. His comments come after several Republicans broke ranks on the issue. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
The COVID-era tax subsidies that help pay for Obamacare expired at the beginning of the month. Senators on Capitol Hill now under pressure to find a path to address healthcare costs.
I am hopeful next week that the Senate will be able to put out a bill that is a compromise that addresses the extension with reforms, including income limits, insurance reforms, the elimination of zero premium plans.
Because it has to conform first with what President Trump says he wants, which, by the way, I totally agree with. And that is, don't give 100% of the money to the insurance companies who take 20% of it for profit and overhead. Give the money to the patient. And she will use.
President Trump on Sunday sought to justify an end to the enhanced Obamacare subsidies, sharing comments from the D.C. think tank Cato Institute, calling for Congress to stop talking about extending the taxpayer-funded subsidies. Instead, the think tank's health policy director calls to restore health insurance relief from Trump's first term. In the post copied by Trump, the director said, "It won't destabilize Obamacare, much simpler than what President Trump's advisors are selling him, much better to assuage the fears of nervous Democrats." The president's post comes after several House Republicans voted with Democrats to extend Obamacare subsidies for 3 years.
The People's House has just delivered a decisive victory for the American people by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits to prevent tens of millions of Americans from experiencing dramatically increased health insurance premiums.
though most Republicans oppose the extension. Several of them told NTD it's a waste of tax dollars.
We were able to uncover through an investigation that the same Social Security number was used 125 times, the same one, to apply for these insurance premiums, and it was accepted 125 times. Wow. So we know that there is rampant waste, fraud, and abuse in that system.
Even with those tax credits in place, Obamacare premiums have skyrocketed. So they're not applying the tax credits, to keep prices under control.
In my view, I don't see the logic behind increasing subsidies on a known broken system, and that's what this is.
House Republicans are calling on top health insurance executives to testify later this month. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Thousands of nurses at several major New York City hospitals have gone on strike. The strike began this morning after negotiations through the weekend failed to yield a breakthrough. The affected hospitals include New York Presbyterian, Montefiore, and Mount Sinai. NTD's Sean Marshall has the details.
Nurses with the New York State Nurses Association picketed outside hospitals across New York City on Monday, calling for safer staffing levels, improved working conditions, and a fair contract.
We are participating in the historic largest nurses strike in New York City today, and we're doing that because we're advocating for our patients, for better care and safety while they are in the hospital.
Union officials say the strike followed months of bargaining in which hospital management failed to make progress on what nurses described as core issues, including staffing levels, health care benefits, and workplace safety.
It is so important for us to strike as nurses because we do not have enough support. We do not have enough nurses. There's too many patients. There's not enough nurses. We are spread so thin. I want to spend more time with my patients. I want to be able to be at bedside, but I can't because I'm running around from room to room to room to room. And it's not enough. We need more support. We need more nurses.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani joined the nurses and urged a return to negotiations.
New Yorkers have a right to quality health care, as do the nurses who provide that care. My job as mayor is to protect both of those rights.
Mamdani called on hospital management and the union to bargain in good faith and reach an agreement that allows nurses who work in this city to live in this city. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Coming up, Elon Musk's AI tool Grok is under fire after reports it created sexualized images without consent. Authorities worldwide are moving quickly to respond. Christina Corona has the story when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Elon Musk's X is facing growing scrutiny after reports that its AI chatbot Grok was used to generate non-consensual sexualized images of women and children. Several countries have taken action, with regulators investigating or blocking access to the tool. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
The UK's media regulator, Ofcom, has launched an investigation into Elon Musk's Grok AI chatbot following reports that the tool was used to create sexually explicit deepfake images, including those involving minors. The British government is set to enforce a new law this week that criminalizes creating sexual deepfakes, calling the content a form of online abuse.
The Internet Watch Foundation reports criminal imagery of children as young as 11, including girls sexualized and topless. This is child sexual abuse.
Kendall says reports show images of women in bikinis as well as in abusive and disturbing situations. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the images disgusting and unlawful.
Lives can and have been devastated by this content, which is designed to harass, torment, and violate people's dignity.
European Union officials have also condemned the platform, warning tech companies they will act if users are not protected. They say regulators can take action and issue fines if rules aren't followed.
They can investigate the service, they can issue enforcement action, and if that enforcement action is not complied with, they can fine the platform £18 million or 10% of their worldwide revenue, whichever is greater.
Southeast Asian countries are also taking action. Indonesia and Malaysia have temporarily blocked access to Grok, citing risks to women, children, and public safety. However, Elon Musk has responded, saying X removes the illegal content, stating, "We take action against illegal content on X, including child sexual abuse material, by removing it permanently, suspending accounts, and working with local governments and law enforcement as necessary." He goes on to say, anyone using or prompting Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they upload illegal content. Musk made almost exactly the same statement on January 3rd. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up in the NFL, the playoffs continue tonight in Pittsburgh, but will home field advantage be enough to negate Houston's defense? Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, we've got some basketball, baseball, even golf news to discuss. But let's start in the NFL as the playoffs continue tonight with Pittsburgh hosting Houston. Who do you favor in this one?
Tiff, I favor Houston in this one. So do the odds makers. They're 3-point favorites on the road. It's really because of their top-ranked defense, especially their pass rush. I think it's going to be a little too much for the Steelers. Now, Aaron Rodgers at 42, still proving to be a good quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't scramble, of course, as well as he used to. I'm not even sure if that would actually matter tonight. If they're going to do this, you would think they're going to use, some kind of quick, short yardage passing game. But the Steelers do get their top receiver back. That's DK Metcalf, who missed the last 2 games of the regular season with that suspension. At the very least, I hope it's exciting as most of the rest of the playoff games that we've had this weekend. 3 of the 5 games had the go-ahead score with less than 2 minutes left. And really, in that Eagles-Niners game, Eagles were very close to making it 4 out of the 5. In any case, the winner of this game will face the Patriots next week. The other 3 games, Buffalo at Denver and then San Francisco at Seattle. Both those games are on Saturday. Sunday, then LA Rams at Chicago and the aforementioned Patriots against the winner of tonight's game. You got all that?
Well, write down some notes next. Shifting gears to baseball, though, the Chicago Cubs have reportedly agreed to a 5-year deal with free agent all-star third baseman Alex Bregman worth $175 million. What do you make of this?
Yeah, Cubs got a good one. I mean, he's an all-star. He hits well. He fields well. And like you said, this is great news for the Cubs. Not so good for his former team, Boston. I mean, a year ago, Boston signed him to a $120 million deal, but Bregman could opt out after the first season. So he had a really good 2025 season. He opted out. Now he's cashed in on a bigger contract. But he plays third base. Now, meanwhile, when the Red Sox signed him, they already had third baseman all-star Rafael Devers there. So two all-stars. They ended up trading Devers during the season. And now with Bregman signing elsewhere, they're without a third baseman. And really, other than, there really aren't any obvious, in-house options for them. And really, other than free agent Bo Bichette, who's more of a middle infielder, there's no obvious options there in free agency. So I really don't know where they find a third baseman here. So good for the Cubs, not so much for the Red Sox. But, I'm not really a Red Sox fan, so it doesn't really matter to me that much. But maybe to Yankees fans, they're probably happy about this, Their rival just took a hit, that's for sure.
All right, well, in golf news, 5-time major champion Brooks Koepka is leaving LIV Golf to rejoin the PGA Tour. Is this a simple transfer? Does he have any special conditions for his return?
Yes, special conditions. Specifically, he's going to have some financial restrictions for his return. First, he agreed to forfeit any player equity shares for the next 5 years. Now, roughly 200 PGA players are equity share members with a total of about $1 billion in equity handed out. So that's on average $5 million per player. Though Koepka was certainly more successful than the average player, so he probably missed out on more than that. Now, the player equity shares were introduced in 2024 as a way for PGA to retain their own players. During that time, they were losing a number of players to LIV Golf. One of those was Koepka, who defected in 2022. Also, another condition for his return, Koepka will not be eligible for this season's $100 million FedEx Cup bonus program, which is their season-long points competition. Now, $100 million is the total prize money, the total pool there. The winner gets $10 million, and it goes on down from there. So he's definitely forfeiting a bunch of money here. There could be some more players defecting soon, though, because this happened because of the newly created Returning Members Program. There's a window of opportunity to return via this program starting today and ending on February 2nd. So stay tuned. We could have some more people coming over here. So I wouldn't really feel bad for him, though. I think Live Golf gave these golfers a ton of money to come over there. Just saying.
It's not about the money.
It's not about the money. You're right.
All right, well, looking at college basketball news, Michigan's loss on Saturday to Wisconsin shook up the top 25 rankings today. Where do things stand now?
Yeah, well, Michigan fell from 2nd to 4th after that loss to Wisconsin. So UConn moves up a spot to number 3. Iowa State moves up to 2 in today's rankings. Meanwhile, Arizona really tightened their grip on number 1, getting 60 of the 61 first place votes. Now, if you remember last week, very close at the top. Arizona had just one more point than Michigan. Not so today. Now, elsewhere in the rankings, Nebraska 16-0. They moved up to number 8. That ties the school record for their highest ranking ever. They were at number 8 in 1966. That was the only other time. And Vanderbilt in the SEC, they're also 16-0. They moved up to number 10. That is our highest ranking since 2011. And Vanderbilt's opponent this Saturday, Florida, that's the defending national champions, had the biggest jump of the week, moving up from non-ranked to number 7. Virginia also moved up 7 spots as well to number 16. Now, unfortunately, Tiff, Kansas fell out of the rankings, so it's a dark day for us Kansas fans. So I don't know if you're sad about that.
You don't have a second choice?
I don't have a second choice. It's KU or no one at this point. And really, I've done pretty well with KU because they've been pretty consistent, not the last couple of years. So we've had a good run, though.
I'm sure your loyalty will be appreciated.
It will. It will. They'll be happy with my boycott of the top 25.
All right, well, Davis Oz, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.